The God of Ideas that I have in mind is, of course, the Abrahamic God, who is the most powerful being conceivable. And if he created the universe, then he would create, he would encompass all the ideas in it. And in the Quran, there are many mentions of reason and exhortations for us to use our God given reason, presumably to solve our problems and resolve our moral dilemmas. So, what are these moral dilemmas that I could possibly be referring to? Moral dilemmas are situations in which the person faced with a dilemma obviously doesn't know what to do for the best. But I think in most situations it's really clear what the right thing to do is. So I see that Jay is in the chat. He he should be able to give me a few examples of moral dilemmas. Because in the time that I've known him, he's never been able to do the right thing without changing his mind. So, what is his problem? I think his problem is that fundamentally he knows what the right thing to do is, but he's afraid to say it because it would be against his personal interests, because he knows that if he says what he believes to be the truth, he will suffer the consequences of being cancelled, being ostracized, and he can't bear that, so he won't say it. And that's why he is always in this revolving door of yes and no, and yeah, but no. And this is why I despise him. Because I know at the back of his mind he knows what the right thing to do is, but he can't do it, he won't do it, because he thinks he's looking after number one, which is himself. But then people who look after number one don't do it very well, do they? They are despised. Politicians are despised. Public intellectuals who are intellectually dishonest are despised. So they don't really get anywhere. They are despised and despicable because they can't make up their minds. And it is, of course, part and parcel of being a man to be capable of straight talking, speaking the truth, to power without fear or favor. And while we can understand that, we must sometimes guard our tongues, to stop offending people above us who may harm us. We want to live in a society where the people in charge are obviously doing the right thing and we have no problem with what they're doing. That is really the aspiration of most humans. It has been put in this way that everything is right with the world and God is in his heaven, in perfect control of everything. Now, there has been philosophical debate about whether God is conscious of everything at all times. And there has been speculation on, whether he sometimes leaves a building, leaves his laboratory, goes for a cup of tea, has a cigarette, and then maybe comes back again. So we can imagine God to be conducting an experiment. He is a scientist, and he's got all his test tubes and, whatever. Whatever tools he needs to conduct the experiment I think of it as a kind of machine that you program. It's like the thermostat attached to your boiler that automatically comes on when the temperature is low and switches off when the required temperature is reached. There is some sort of automatic mechanism whereby things are regulated in some way. So we can think of ideas of good and evil, and I'm saying that the logic of this system of opposites is that we won't understand good until we understand evil, and we won't know what is evil until we understand good. And really, evil is the price of knowing good. But in the West, where moral relativism operates in a half-hearted way, we know that God has more or less allowed the consequences of moral relativism to play out. I mean, obviously, he doesn't immediately zap sinners because he I think, waits for the consequences to be rolled out, and presumably to humble us, because if we all knew that the moment we sinned we would be punished, then we wouldn't sin. We would be like automatons, because if we knew that we would immediately be issued with a parking ticket the moment we put our car in that space, then we wouldn't. We drive around for a bit until we found a parking space. If we knew we would be lashed 100 times the moment we engaged in extramarital sex, I doubt if we would ever do it. And as my criminal law lecturer pointed out to us, that criminals don't commit their crimes expecting to be caught and convicted. They do it because they think they'll get away with it, for a while anyway. There is this other thought, this view from Judaism, to the effect that before the disease, the cure exists. You can find it if you look for it, but I forget now which. I can look it up, I suppose. Which verse in the Torah it refers to. It's something by Rabbi Sachs. What is the purpose of this belief? It is a principle that God creates a cure before the disease. Bad things may happen, but God, waiting for the rest of the page to load. But God has already given us the remedy if we know where to look for it. So we read of the deaths of Miriam and Aaron, and how Moses was told he would die in the desert without entering the promised land. This is a terrifying encounter with mortality. Yet before any of this, we first hear the law of the red heifer, the rite of purification after contact with death. The Torah has placed it here to assure us in advance that we can be purified after any bereavement. Human mortality does not ultimately bar us from being in the presence of divine immortality. Though not all commentators agree, its real significance is that it is God's answer in advance to the sin of the golden calf. I'm afraid the reasoning is a bit convoluted, which is probably why I never really got it. But I'll put it in the chat in case anybody's interested. Too many hyperlinks which have hyperlinks to other hyperlinks. But basically, you can understand it as the solution is there. To every problem has a solution. We just don't know where to look for it, and we don't look for it because we are sinful, we are disobedient, we think we know better, we dismiss a whole bunch of solutions because, well, we don't like them. And that is an example of the sin being its own punishment. So it seems that in this world we are all punished eventually for our sins, or groups of people in particular. This is really the way to look at it. I mean, for individuals, it's a bit too diffuse, but we can only get a better picture if but by looking at humanity through its groups of people. So the biggest groups of people would be the religious groups, the Jews, Christians, and Muslims, the Hindus, and the Buddhists. That there's more than that, but I'm just listing the religions. But even the countries that use purely secular ideologies were once upon a time based on a religion. So China is an interesting case because the Hadith speaks quite respectfully of China during the Tang dynasty, when it was confident and cosmopolitan and outward looking. But the point is, China remains in existence, even though its people over the centuries have suffered greatly. There have been, famines, pestilence, invasions, revolutions. And the Jews, too, are still in existence, even though they've been kicked out of their own countries, and all kinds of things have happened to them. But they still remain in existence as a group. And so do the Chinese. They have a distinct identity. Many people have views about them, or think they'll, they think they know what's Chinese or who is Chinese. And even if they're incorrect in their perception, the general perception of the Chinese is strong, even though quite often it is based on ignorance, and the same applies to the Jews. So with regard to all these groups of people that we are in, we should be comparing ourselves with, really we are all competitive individuals, and the groups can compete, the nations compete, empires compete, religious groups, I'm sure, look at the others to see how well they're doing. And is there an objective way of measuring the efficacy of all these religions? And I'm saying there is, and it's so obvious if only people would listen. Because really, what is religion for? It is obviously a moral system designed to keep the group in existence and apart from others. And in times of moral confusion in Western nations, as well as an identity crisis. You know Westerners are suffering from an identity crisis because, well, they're always on about their identity and their status and wondering what the hell the government is doing and why they're doing it. So yesterday I saw a movie and it was the preview, the ads that led up to it that I thought was interesting. In that, I felt like saying, well, where are the white people? All the people in the ads are black or Asian. It's like, where are the white people? And so I do sympathise when white people wonder what the hell is happening. My companion was female and middle class, and she said it. And, she's not, as far as I know, active in politics or in the alt-right. I mean, I'm sure she considers herself an ordinary mum, an ordinary middle class mum. But she's wondering what the hell's happening, and I do speak to other people in real life, and they are middle class, upper middle class even, and they also wonder what the hell is happening. So something is obviously not right. I'm saying it is actually very sinister. And I do sympathise, and I'm saying there is a solution. But people are just not thinking right. Not working things out properly, or at least not seeing my point of view. And it's a bit of a shame because I'm often accused of repeating myself. My mother often says I repeat myself, and I say to her, I have to repeat myself because people who don't get it, they don't get it that their moral system is breaking down, and so is their political system. I mentioned the Tory leadership contest, and she was saying, well, they're just going to be as bad as each other. And maybe there isn't much point in choosing between a rock and a hard place. But I'm saying every problem has a solution. It may not be the solution you want or are capable of achieving, but there is a solution. And we have to think about it in a logical way, and then we get our solution, perhaps, or closer to it. Hello, MENJ. Maybe you have time to join us. That would be nice. I've just come from E.A. Tower, having sorted this Christian out, and in the end he left. Okay, so one of a range of my solutions to a range of problems in dealing with Christians is that, please don't beat about the bush. I mean, they're still doing it now. There was some idiotic Christian. I didn't even know what he was on about, and he thought by interrupting the others and not giving the others a chance to speak, he was being very clever, or asking really dumb questions that you think, what's the point of that question? But if you go in for the kill of idolatry, you'll get them every time. It's a kill shot, really, because Christians can't explain or justify the Trinity. And if you go straight in there, you waste a lot. You don't waste a lot of time, because if you say, if you beat about the bush, they're going to just reel out all the, chapter and verses and in the New Testament. If they mention the New Testament, you just sweep it aside and say, look, who wrote the New Testament? It's only mortal and fallible men. It doesn't matter what they say. they're only mortal and fallible men, and the word of God should always trump the word of mortal and fallible men of dubious provenance, testifying that they met and executed blasphemer. There you go. It gets them every time. They have no way of wriggling out of that. The worm cannot escape. And I know that there's been, centuries of conditioning of Jews and Muslims. We know Christian empires have been, in existence for a long time. There was the Spanish Empire from the 1500s, wasn't it? When did the Spanish Empire begin? Yeah, we know that, in Elizabethan times, the Spanish were calling the British a nation of pirates. So that's been around a long time. So it started between, it says 1492 to 1976. And the expression, the empire on which the sun never set is actually a translation from Spanish, and I may be able to say it in Spanish for you. El imperio donde nunca se pone el sol. That's what. That's what it is in Spanish before the English appropriated it. So we have all these groups, we have empires, we have religious groups, and the religious groups last longer than empires because, ideas last longer than people because, ideas don't grow old and die. I mean, they can be forgotten, they can be suppressed, but obviously they have a longer shelf life because they don't become ill or anything like that. So we need to understand the world of ideas and the world of politics. Sorry, I was just seeing that I pronounce it right in Spanish. El imperio donde nunca se pone el sol. So that's how to say it in Spanish. So I'm saying every problem has a solution, and you already know what my solution is. We have to tell the Christians that their religion is kaput. We have to do it, and we have to. I'm not a sadistic person, but honestly, I mean, the only way they can move over to Islam is if they know that Christianity is irreparably broken, and so is liberalism, and that they don't trust their political leaders to substitute it with anything better. I mean, the British are faced with. You have to feel sorry for them, a neurotic woman, Liz Truss, and a Hindu that they can't bear the idea of, So the sort of dithering between racism and misogyny, thinking, I actually do feel sorry for them, but you have to understand also that all empires are waist deep in blood. It's like, all empires are acquired by war, and the Anglo-Saxons have a global empire. They've had two global empires. The British had their global empire, and then when Britain won the war against Germany, the Americans took over. So the Anglo-Saxons have a lot to answer for, and they started two world wars. Or there's a third world war. Christians will have started it, so it's not looking good for Christians. So if we want to avoid a third world war, we have to start taking avoidant action. And we have to be speaking clearly and simply so that they understand. And also something you have to understand is that these Westerners, they have a hole in their heads. I've been talking to them for well over a decade. And then they're not right in the head because there's just too many things they can't talk about. They can't talk about the failure of Christianity. They can't talk about the failure of liberalism or democracy or feminism, because it's all these ideas that are associated with Western identity, and they just want to cling to something that that makes them feel good. So you have to understand that they are neurotic, and the only way I can survive dealing with them is to think of them as psychiatric patients, because most of them don't make any sense. I know some of them are well-meaning and try, but they are neurotic and they're not making sense. You can't really talk to them about politics because they're going to get angry and upset with you. And a lot of them just think they can go back to Christianity, and they don't even understand the burnt and bloody history of Christianity. And some of them want to, let's go back to burning heretics at the stake. It is that pathetic. And their politicians don't talk to them because they're afraid that they're overcome by guilt or the idea of their own incompetence. So there is no communication no real communication between men and women, the rich and poor, the government and the governed, the old and the young. And each group has its own ideas and is going round in its own revolving door. And the only way to break out of it is to say, it's really to become clones of Claire Core. That's how to break out of it. And the solution, in my view, is for Jews and Muslims to become clones of Claire Core and call out the failure of Christianity. And why not? Why not? It's not against the law. They have no defense. They don't believe in this crap themselves. They don't know. So the Archbishop of Canterbury, do you think he even believes in God? I don't think so. Or the Pope. He only pretends to because it's the condition of him keeping his job. And those of you who are interested in the subject should read a book by A.H.M. Jones. It's quite an old book, but you can find it online, and it's called Constantine and the Conversion of Europe. Now, it's a fascinating book if you like this sort of thing. It will tell you what a lot of bother Christians were to Constantine. And you'll be amazed at the detail It is almost as if you think, wow, what a lot of detail that they still have, because the Romans kept records, and very detailed records. And basically, Constantine was just saying, oh, come on, to just agree. We can't be having these, doctrinal debates, because I want to roll out Christianity, and I want it to be the religion of Imperial Rome. And you lot, meaning the bishops, are not helping with your extremist, intractable doctrinal disagreements. And he never saw the problem within his lifetime. He might have died thinking, oh, well, I've got my way. The imperial religion is Aryan Christianity. But that only lasted for 2 generations, i.e., a bit of his lifetime and his son's lifetime. And then after that, the Edict of Thessalonica was passed. And that was when the Roman Empire became officially Trinitarian. And if you read the Edict of Thessalonica, the Wikipedia entry, it's nothing that long. You will find that it was then that other kinds of Christianity was outlawed. So you can easily imagine what Constantine would have done if, having come to terms with the fact that the imperial cult was failing and he needed a new religion, and there was this thing called Christianity, which was half-baked, and which Constantine spent decades of his life trying to fully bake with his Council of Nicaea. But we know he would have adopted Islam if that choice had been available. So we already know the correct religion that the West ought to have. Unfortunately, for the West, we don't have that excuse. In the West, we don't have the excuse of saying, oh, well, we have nothing but Christianity. We just have to stick with the best available religion. Because there is Islam, and, nobody can think of a better available guide to humanity, not even the most rabid Islamophobe. They can't think of a better book. I mean, what are they going to say? The Communist Manifesto, Mein Kampf. They haven't got anything comparable. And therefore, the solution is clear. And the solution should be stated clearly, briefly, repeatedly, by Jews and Muslims who want better government. Yes, Christine Ramsey, Jordan Peterson is, well, kind of Pope, I suppose. You look at his, I think, was it 1.3 million? But let me see how many subscribers he has. And he, to his credit, he's taking a stand on transgenderism, and I hope you subscribe to his channel, but it's I can't think of anybody else who has the moral and intellectual respectability to influence people, but he also has to be careful, and we can only 5.3 million subscribers. That's not bad, is it? But he has to be careful too, because YouTube could, delete his channel, couldn't they? In the same way that Twitter deleted Trump's account. So We know what the solution is. Those of us who care, who are not too Islamophobic, to contemplate it and even to welcome it. I mean, I really have won all my arguments a long time ago. It's just that, dealing with people with a hole in their head who don't see that they have a moral imperative to submit to truth, logic, and morality, they think they can continue to ignore me and pretend I don't exist. But I bang on their doors and I push my messages through their letterboxes, I do. And they know what I'm saying, or I know there'll be enough people to tell them exactly what I'm saying. Many of these people I know in real life. But the fact is, they don't seem to get what I'm saying because they're either too afraid to engage, or they are in a state of neurosis, which means that they can't ask the logical next question because they want to avoid the subject. They want me to finish speaking and then they can go back to their own thoughts. So these people can only talk about their own ideas. They can't engage with the ideas of others. And they also know that there is no other more powerful solution than the one that I am proposing, because it is based on the Abrahamic God and my interpretation of the purpose of the Abrahamic God. So here's the narrative. It is that everything happens for a reason, and if Westerners are suffering from their incompetent and corrupt government, it is because of their sin, and they can escape suffering by renouncing their sin, acknowledging that they have done much to attract their punishment, and to turn over a new leaf, and to admit that Christianity is kaput, democracy is dementia, liberalism is for losers, and they really don't expect their corrupt and incompetent leaders to right any of the damage done by so many centuries of liberalism. Because liberalism is really the problem, even though many Westerners thought that liberalism was the solution to Christianity. Of course, it wasn't an immediate replacement of liberalism of Christianity. You had Christianity existing side by side with liberalism, and over the centuries, liberalism just got stronger and stronger until most people were not Christian and most people were liberal, and then liberalism started to rot and is now turning into intersectionality, and nobody is accountable. And we want our leaders to be accountable, but we know, the British know anyway, that whoever becomes prime minister, they won't be around for long enough to be truly accountable for anything. And so the British have to admit that their so-called unwritten constitution is a fraud. Britain is run on the doctrine of parliamentary sovereignty, which means that Parliament has the ability to pass and repeal any law. And Israel is run on this doctrine. And this means that Britain and Israel, both liberal democracies, have the personality and the character of a neurotic woman who can never make up her mind about anything. Not only is she neurotic, but she is also immoral and wanting to deny her past. Think of Britain and perhaps America as a as I'm not going to say Lady Macbeth. I think Blanche, Blanche Dubois would be a good example. We know what happened to Blanche Dubois, don't we? She had to be taken away by men in flapping white coats when she behaved in such a provocative way when she was staying with a sister who was married to Stanley, the Pole that she was teasing and mocking for being a Pole. You know, the character played by Marlon Brando, and well, apparently he raped her, or maybe he didn't, and she complained to her sister. The sister wouldn't believe her, and then she went a bit crazy and had to be taken away by men in flapping white coats. You don't want that to happen to you, do you, Europeans? I mean, the equivalent of that would be World War III breaks out, and then Europeans and Christians will have the terrible reputation of having started 3 world wars. And you will, well, your reputations will be mud. You will be despised. There will be nowhere for you to run because everybody will see a white person and blame them for the Third World War and the other 2 as well, and for being, well, idolaters who worship an executed blasphemer. That is the worst case scenario that I can put before you. And who is to say it won't happen with your incompetent and corrupt politicians? So it's a thought. What could you do as individual morons and vegetables in the chat? You could be talking to, well, the highest status person that you know that and trust, and, well, run my ideas past them and ask them to run my ideas past the highest status person that they know until it gets to the top as quickly as possible, until somebody who is honorable and influential and connected with the media gets me on the BBC for an interview to explain my ideas to the nation and the world. So there we are. Here is my solution. So Christine Ramsey is recommending books by C.S. Lewis. I haven't read Surprise by Joy, but then I would be shunning Christian myths. So Lord of the Rings, it's basically racist, you know. It's like it's a Tolkien, you know, all these sort of different groups of people in Hobbit land or whatever, and you know they all behave in a certain way, and you know it's this sort of nice, neat world where everyone behaves according to type, and everything is so morally orderly. The most powerful solution is love. Well, you can call it that. I prefer law and order. Law and order will make love more easy between all the people that exist who need to love each other, in particular husband and wife, parent and children. So this is something to be considered. I do have a solution. I know it can be easily rolled out. The moment there is a decision to decide to platform my ideas, obviously it's not being platformed at the moment with my 4 live viewers. But I do have a solution, and I think it is a viable one, and I don't need lots of anti-Semites, Islamophobes and racists in the chat to post their insults and abuse and their hate speech to make the point. Because really, if God exists and hears, then that would be enough. So this is how it's supposed to be if your enemies have an overwhelming majority. The only thing that could save you is something more powerful than your enemies who numerically overwhelm you. But there is a verse in the Quran, chapter 8, verse 65, chapter 8, verse 66, and it says that the ratio could be as great as 1 to 10. So 10 people can, the numbers is actually 100 people can defeat 1,000 people. 200 people can defeat 2,000 people. But weakened 100 can still defeat 200. So there's all to hope for if you believe in that sort of thing. And the solution is very simple to explain. So back to the question of the God of Ideas. The God of Ideas is, of course, the Abrahamic God, who will have ordered and crafted his ideas in a way that makes true the statement that the sin is its own punishment. It may not be us that is being punished. I mean, you get, previous generations who didn't look after the country properly, and the next generation, the future generations, they suffer from the failure of the previous generations to do the routine maintenance that they're supposed to be doing. And we just need to, look after things better, which is the health of our own mental state, our ability to exercise reason, using undisputed truth to come up with solutions that do not transgress the 7 no-hide laws. And this is all we have to do to succeed. And if we can more or less state this position to anybody who will listen, we may yet prevail.